Hi, my name is Alexis.
And I'm Anna.
And I'm Evelyn.
I'm Victoria.
And I'm Katie.
We are the Marmalade Mermaids. This week, our flag means discovery. Season 1, Episode 7, This is Happening.
But when I was thinking about discovery, I was thinking a lot about self-discovery and moments in my life where all of a sudden just sort of like the lights come on, you're like, oh, that's what's going on. And I would say it happens quite a bit because I'm always sort of trying to unpack what's going on inside my head. But I would say one moment of discovery for me that was really important was when I like astrology. I like birth charts. I think they're helpful. And so I did my birth chart just randomly because I was part of some other group and they were talking about it. And I thought, I've never done this before. So I did my birth chart and I read the chart and I didn't understand who this person was. I was like, this doesn't make sense. I mean, I get some of it, but not a lot. But then I gave it some time and I went back later and really sort of let myself dive deep into all of the different parts of your birth chart, you know, your sun sign and your moon sign, all that thing. And I think that really helped me kind of open myself up and be able to receive that information of like, what if this is what you look like from the outside? What if this is how you engaged with the world? And it was so comforting and it was so freeing. And I'm a Cancer sun. And it was just this beautiful moment of, oh, I'm not weird. I'm a Cancer. Like I'm a crab and I walk sideways. And that's why I'm always out here doing something that's a little bit different than everyone else. And Victoria and I talk about it frequently. And she sort of always brings it up. She's like, you're a crab walking sideways. And I'm a fish in the water, kind of doing my own thing. And I think it just really helped me feel that I understood. I'm not wrong. This is how I interact with the world. And other people aren't wrong. This is how they interact with the world. And I don't think it maybe is prescriptive exactly for who you have to be, but I think it's just this really lovely opportunity to sort of let yourself kind of explore new places, new aspects of yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And so for me, I would say that's a really profound moment of discovery. And that's a moment I think of particularly with, you know, Ed and Lucius, where Lucius is like, here's what's going on. And then Ed's face is just, oh, what? You know, and now what are you going to do? So yeah, that's my story about discovery.
I like that you took it with self-discovery. I didn't think about it that way.
Okay, so the episode starts with Steve and Ed having a conversation, which kind of leads to Ed stating that he doesn't like to idle by. He likes to go out on adventures. Conversation gets interrupted by Roach, who basically tells them that they're out of oranges, and oranges is used to treat scurvy because the Swede has scurvy, which then leads to kind of a split adventure for this episode. Steve doesn't really care too much about getting oranges. He sends the crew to go do that, and Steve wants to go on a treasure hunt with this map that he purchased. And they all go on the same island, St. Augustine, which is where Jim is from. So Jim and the crew goes and looks for oranges. They find oranges, but it's on the land that Jim used to be from, like lived in, and it's this church where Nana's there. And that's where we kind of learn more about Jim. Oluwande learns more about Jim. Oh no!
Well, keep going.
It's
keep going. You're doing great.
Man,
and nothing else happens.
And nothing else happened. That's it.
Could we please, where did we see the theme of discovery in this episode?
Before we jump in, I was thinking about like discovery and what it means. Obviously, I looked at the etymology. I didn't see a whole lot that was super helpful. And in my mind, it was finding something that was previously unknown. I think about like the whole thing starts off with looking for oranges. And like, this is the mission. And also like the idea that some discoveries just make themselves known. You can't escape it. You can't avoid it. Like the Swede scurvy is something that people discovered and you just can't ignore it. And then some discoveries, sometimes you might be looking for one thing, but discover something else. So I was just noticing some different kinds of discovery, how much of discovery is being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I So I liked your point, Alexis, about, the discovery starts with the needing the oranges. I actually think, and this is just my own little theory, I think discovery actually begins at the end of the previous episode when Ed and Steed are in the bathroom, or in his little bathroom area, the bathtub, and Ed's giving this information about what happened to his dad and what he did when he was little, because the very, very beginning of the episode is Steed is just so like, I'm into Ed and I love him and he's great. And Ed's like, see ya, I gotta go, And it's this really interesting pattern that you can track throughout the series, where there are these really intimate moments with Ed and Steed. And right after that moment of intimacy, where they're discovering new things about themselves and about each other and about their relationship, immediately following that, one of them is like, I gotta go, bye, I'll see you later. It happens over and over again. And so one reason I really love this episode is sort of it takes what happened in that previous and really ties directly into it, that there's this moment that they shared that is really intimate, and you can tell that Ed's never told anyone before, and that his next response to that moment is, I think I'm gonna leave, I think I'm gonna go. Because it's too close, like it's too much revelation. It's just, he's too seen, he's too known by Steed. And so I really like that moment, because then again, I think it sets up all of these other moments that are going to come up in the next couple episodes that happen really quickly. It's like a discovery made as the relation starts to move forward really fast, but all the groundwork has been laid, and to see how the two of them sort of react to the momentum of everything that's kind of building up in this particular episode. So that was, I guess I could say many things about discovery, but that's where I'll start, is that I think it's that moment before the episode even starts regarding discovery.
I know we've been talking a lot about Steed and Ed, but one of the things that I kind of really enjoyed was the interaction between like Olawande and Jim and everything, and like kind of the discovery of a person like that you've been around for a long time. And it's always like one of those fascinating things that, like, I don't know, like I've had a few people in my life, one of them most recently, one of my coworkers that I really enjoy, but recently discovered that she had a very hard life and like she is completely recovered. So I always find it very interesting to, like, you never know like all of this stuff until once they feel more comfortable to kind of like let go, like allow that information out and everything. And so it was really fascinating. And then like kind of connecting all the dots, I'm like, oh, okay, so that's kind of why you are the way you are. Now everything makes sense and stuff. And so like it was really fun to see kind of that interaction, because Olawande is like realizing kind of like, we don't know anything. You're like very, very, very secretive, even though we've been around together for like forever. And it's just like, yeah, you get like, you have like, there are moments in your life where you meet these people, coworkers or even classmates or anything, you've been around them for like years and realize like, man, I don't know anything about you. And I've had many instances where I'm just like, I did not expect you, like I did not expect you to have this history, like no like bad judgment or anything like that, but it's always fascinating to like learn about like someone's life and everything, because sometimes are very good at hiding it. And so that's kind of what I saw with like Olawande and Jim.
Yeah, that's really similar to what Anna was saying is happening at the end of the previous episode, right? Where Steed learns something very real and authentic about Ed. I love that you just brought that up with the Jim and Olawande thing. And what's interesting is to parallel that to what's going on with Ed and Steed, which I think this has come up before. We see what's going on with Ed and Steed is being not exactly mirrored, but played out in some other character pairing on the ship or in the show. And that's interesting because I just realized that's what's going on. Or I think one of the things that's going on is as Ed and Steed are like wrestling with this, like, oh no, wait, you love me. No, let me pulling away. Because Jim and Olawande have that moment where Jim really doesn't want Olawande to see this part of them. And then they do have their moment, and it really is like truly like, okay, I'm going to let you see me and I'm going to be vulnerable. And then it gets interrupted. which is interesting. And we like, I'm trying to think, and we do see a little bit of that of Steve with Steed and Ed, of course. It just takes them, they go on a different path to get there. And then I think we know that there's going to be back and forth for a different reason. They get in their own way. And with Jim and Olawande, someone else is getting in their way as they're discovering their attention and their affection for each other. And so that's really interesting to think about, Evelyn, like what you're saying, like when you really see this person, what does that move you to do? What does that call you to do? What they each do is they learn this thing about each other, because then Ed not only learns something about himself, but then learns more about Steed after he just made himself vulnerable. And now what does that call him to do?
Victoria, that's really interesting, pulling all those different pieces together, because I like what you said about Jim's experience of discovery throughout the series is interrupted by other people. It's not Jim, moving away because they're scared or whatever. It's them sort of like standing like, I'm ready to sort of like be honest and open and connect. And then, Nana gets in the way and other things get in the way in season 2 that, that's, I guess I never really thought about, like when it's outside of your control, where discovery happens, but then again, like the impact that we can have on other people in their moments of the path that they're trying to go on, and those choices that we make can kind of interrupt their ability, not their ability, but, the process of discovery can sort of get, put on hold just because life happens. I don't know that it's intentional, but that's just sort of how it goes. It's not like this really clear, straight through line.
No, I love that. And I'm really glad that Evelyn brought up the discovery that's happening between Olawande and Jim, because Olawande like has been so patient and loving towards Jim, and like, you're actually freakishly private. Like, I have not pushed on this, and I don't think he recognized that. And I just love that moment when he's like, I don't even know your favorite color, and Jim's teal. And that moment where Olawande's like, who are you? Love that. It doesn't matter how well you know somebody or for how long, that like, I don't think that people should ever, like, I don't know myself that well. And I feel like pretty self-reflective and I know myself, but there are things that happen on a regular basis. I won't say weekly, but happen pretty often. I'm like, ooh, I did not know I would respond that way. Like, and I think sometimes you can know a person really well, but you learn something about them and you're like, who are you? Like, I didn't even know that. And it's not a bad thing or a criticism. It's just like, wow, it's this like beautiful discovery about them.
When I was thinking about some different questions, one of the questions I have kind of relates to this idea is, how do we discover things about other people? And we can discover through the things that they tell us, like their favorite color. I also like in this episode that we get some stories and some memories from Nana that kind of show another side. So sometimes we discover things about people through other people and their stories. Sometimes people point out things to us, like Lucius points out to Blackbeard, you're kind of intense. Did you know that about yourself? Like sometimes we learn that way. And then I also thought perhaps hypotheticals, because I love the moment when they're sitting and talking about this hypothetical inn and restaurant where they kind of have like and you can get to know someone through a hypothetical as well.
I love that, Alexis. I didn't think about like they discovered like an imaginary world to share together. Because I think there's something really beautiful when two people, or like a relational thing, because it's happened with groups of people before, where you're kind of building this idea. And even if it never comes to fruition, like that, there's a lot of merch, of Jeff's Inn by the Sea or Blackbeard's. Yeah, I love that. I didn't think about that, them discovering kind of this fantasy place together.
I love that thought, Alexis, because I never put this together, but Ed at the beginning tells Steve, he's like, I'm just not built for being idle or whatever. And then you come to this moment where what he's talking about, like, you don't have the restaurant isn't on a boat, like he's settled somewhere and he has a restaurant and you sell fishing equipment. Like he says that, but then obviously he has this thing that he has been carrying inside him. And I don't think it just all of a sudden comes out. I think it's something that he probably has thought about. And now he has someone to share it with. And so I just think that's interesting of how do we sort of let ourselves discover those pieces of us? But how do other people make it real or make it possible for us to actually voice it out loud and sort of make it something more concrete as opposed to just like this passing thing? And how does that impact the story we tell about ourselves and what we really want? It's really cool. It's an
And,
awesome
and,
thought.
and Steed facilitates that. That's really interesting because it's Steed complimenting and turning, oh my genius line, the way you tenderize, like and who knows, like if he can see Ed being so uncomfortable in nature and just like doesn't want to be there, and so he's disarming him by like validating what he did in beating that snake, and then also pivots. It's totally improv, and that's what I think like is amazing when you meet that friend that you click with, and all of a sudden like what you were saying, Alexis, like they discover this thing, and you discover these worlds you can create with this person through conversation. They're not planned. You're just like riffing off each other, and so Steed lays the groundwork again. And I guess that's interesting too. They each take turns laying the groundwork. So Steve lays the groundwork to validate Ed and about his discomfort, and then disarm him by turning it into something else entirely. And then, like what you're saying, Anna, like he has this thing inside of him, but it's only because of this weird turn of a moment that anyone else would be like, I'm sorry, you just turned him beating a snake into tenderizing? And like Ed picks up what he's throwing down and he runs with it, and he's like, yup, I'm amazed. I mean, that's amazing when I think about like what you're saying, like that person seeing you and then providing this like very safe space for you to be you and discover things about you and share those things that you already knew, but now you can say them. And of course, like Lucius just sitting there agog, like, what show am I watching right now?
I had a moment when we were watching. I kind of wish we were going to do Lectio Divina again, because the moment when Lucius is sitting there really reminds me of The Lion King. I'm like, I can see what's happening and they don't have a clue, right?
Yeah. But I also love this world that it is very co-created. But I love that this world that they co-created, that Steed really puts himself artistically into that world. Like, oh, they're not going to want that. And he's, who's that guy? I want that guy. He's like, well, that's me. And he's like, oh, yeah. I just love that it's this very cat and mouse flirtatious thing. And then it can be voiced kind of in fantasy, like, no, I want you, to go back to the desire, then to then have that play out in reality.
Which I think is really cool, this idea of Ed beating the snake and stabbing it, turning that into craftsmanship, to go back to our previous theme on Steve's part. He's like, oh, so tender, like think. And Ed's sort of like, yeah, I can do anything I want. Like I would be amazing as a chef, which is so cute. And there's something about the way the two performers are in this scene. It just feels like improv. I don't know if it actually was improv, but it has that back and forth, that yes and, where they're just sort of riffing on each other. I don't know if it was written this way, but even if it was, the performance gives it that really like free and loose quality, where it just seems like neither one of them really knew where this would end up. And I think that obviously is, again, like makes sense why Lucius is, because they're sort of not really sort of trying to look at the facade of like who they have to be or who they have to present as, both of them. That's why it's sort of like, it drops for both of them. And Lucius is able to see actually what's going on with that. Again, like with that face, he's just sort of watching it go back and forth. So again, just all the things tying together in this one little moment, in this one little scene. So cool.
This is not a shock for me. Like relationships and relational things are kind of where my wheelhouse is. I just love that stuff. And I find there's so much discovery of relationships here. There's the self-discovery, which is the place that Anna took it, that I love. But so like that relationship with yourself is really important. But there's some discovery about what it means to be a crew and lovers and friends. And I absolutely adore the way that Lucius and the whole crew really have such a sweet respect for Steed and the way that they protect him. And I think that really shines in this episode. And I love that Ed is pulled into that. We can talk more about it later. And then I love it's kind of not so great, but Izzy's love for Ed, the way he discovers a way to make an alliance and really like team up with other people because Steed has broken Ed's brain. And how am I going to get somebody to help me on that? So I think that's a really neat discovery. Like, we can discover things out of necessity, like the oranges, or out of like hardship, whether it's really like based in reality or if it's just what happens, like a fearful thing. And then how we like form alliances against a common enemy. I thought that was a neat kind of relationship discovery.
Well, I thought much of Discovery, or like how much of Discovery is being in the right place at the right time. Like Steed discovers a moth. Like he's there looking for it, or not, like he's in the right place at the right time. It wasn't the mission. It wasn't something he was seeking, but it's just, haha, like, look at this neat thing we found. I also have been thinking about how much of Discovery is learning to see. Started a podcast, really like it. It's called Learning to See, but it's talking about these different biases that we have and how much of it is there's a Latin quote. It means whatever is received in the manner of the receiver. So this idea that you have to be ready to accept, and if you are not ready to accept, you won't perceive it. It doesn't occur to you. So this idea of discovery, I don't know how I really directly relating that to the characters and their situations in this episode, but just this idea of when we're ready to see that, that's when it appears, or like being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I think Jim and Olawande are a perfect example of that, because we've seen different moments that they've had, and I think there's other moments where I think you could think, oh, is this the moment where they really connect? But they each, I think that's a great point. Like, you have to be ready to accept, which we could see in a lot of characters, but I guess that's the first thing that came to mind is what that moment between Jim and Olawande is very, it's just very real. And like they're just both ready, and so it gets interrupted, but they're ready to really see each other and like receive each other in a way that what we're talking about is going on with Ed and Steve. There's this I still haven't figured like how to describe it, but like this dance of like, oh, chase me, oh no, chase me, and so Jim and Olawande are doing that, and I would say they've never done that. I would say they're just not ready. I like the way you put it, like they're just not ready to accept. It's not a game. It's just that Jim obviously has a lot going on. Olawande has this just long-suffering patience and affection for Jim that is just there for every moment and is like, I'm ready when Jim is ready. But I think Olawande is especially ready because really he really gets to know Jim in this episode, and he's like, I still love you.
Do you think Olawande has any kind of resentment in the moment where Frenchie knew that Jim was from St. Augustine, but Olawande never knew? And I wonder if that person like maybe made Olawande feel like, hey, you never talk. You're weirdly secretive and I don't know you at all. And maybe that person like spurred it because like how does he know that about you, and we've been friends for so long?
That's a great point. I didn't catch that. That's an amazing point. But yeah, that would make sense why Olawande is like all of a sudden like, okay, come on, friend, like we need to I know you, and I think you need to start opening up. And I love Jim's response of like, I'm normal secretive. Like no, that's not what Olawande wants. And again, like he's willing to be patient, but then he's also willing to push. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna let this up. Like this is important to me. And Jim kind of understands that. And I like, there's a thought that Victoria had about Alexis's comment, and it was coming together. It was what Victoria had said about Olawande and Jim not playing games. I think, again, like it's that parallel between Ed and Steed, where you see all these like coming closer and then pulling back. They're not playing a game. Like you could interpret it that way, but that's not what's going on. When both of them sort of like have those moments and then have to retreat, it's because they're not ready. They're just not ready for that next, moving forward to that next step of like, now you've seen me and now we have to sort of go from here. I like that a lot. And then when you were talking about receiving Alexis, the first thing that came to my mind was like this really lovely, quiet moment of discovery where Ed is the one who discovers that it's a petrified orange. Because Steve pulls it out, he says it's a rock, he tosses it to Ed, and Ed just could have been like, yep, oh, sorry, it's a rock. And he doesn't. He thinks it's a rock or like something worse, and he cleans it off. And he's willing to receive it and hold it and be like, okay, here it is. Here's your treasure that you found. And then it's because that he's willing to receive, this thing that's important to Steve, that then he finds out, oh, look what you did find, something that is really uniquely you, that Steve is just over the moon about. And so I love that idea of that wouldn't have come if Ed wasn't sincere about wanting to help Steve on his treasure hunt. He's not just placating him. And I think it's interesting because Steve's kind of excited when Ed's like, okay, yeah, we're going to use the little bit of mat we have left. And then when he starts to dig, he's like, now I feel like you're just patronizing me. And Ed's like, I am, And so I think that they start to be able to read each other. And I think, again, they're able to receive what each are bringing without judgment, without getting upset or out shutting down. And then again, like all this stuff comes out of it. So anyway, those are two amazing thoughts of things I hadn't thought about before.
Yeah. And even though like relationships aren't about like accounting, but Ed just reciprocated what Steve gave to Ed with the tenderizing, like and so I hadn't thought about that just now because I didn't notice that last time. But when the last time I watched it, or how many times, like you said, that he takes it and cleans it, I was like, oh my gosh. He's all in, even though he's saying it could be like poop. And so, or something. Anyway, and then I just realized as you were explaining it that way, I'm like, oh, and which is exactly what Ed did, or Steve did for Ed earlier with like turning, like stabbing and beating a snake into tenderizing.
I think this episode should have been called Lucius Helps Others Discover, because I feel like Lucius is kind of this pivot point that helps point things out to other people that then they can discover. I mean, definitely a lot with Ed and Steed, but I do feel like he's there to help the crew. Like, hey guys, here's the real tea, but I'm also going to play along because we got to make our captain feel good. Like, he has a beautiful balance in the way that he loves on is the only term I can't think of a better term, but loves on Steed. He's like, yeah, he's a dum-dum, but he's our dum-dum. And like, he's still very real about it. And I love how aware he is of himself that he can say like, I'm not being sarcastic. That's just my voice. Like, I know this sounds like sarcasm. People perceive it that way. And because I think he's so comfortable in his own skin, he's really able to help other people discover things about their relationships.
And that's amazing, because when you characterize it like that, which I hadn't thought of, now I'm thinking of Touchstone, like the court jester, like being the one that speaks the truth because they get to see everything. And then the fact that like he mentions that thing about the sarcasm, right? People are going to misunderstand my humor and what I'm bringing to the court. And I had not, and because I just was thinking of like Lucius, like always writing, observing, writing, taking it in. And obviously he's had his own experience with life where he's experienced pain and has like supported himself and gotten through it. And so anyway, yeah, just when the way you said it, the immediate thing that first came to my mind is Touchstone. It's just like, and the truth that comes from Touchstone. Interesting.
Which goes back to Anna saying this whole series is about Black Pete. Of course he needs like high caliber lover. So any other Discovery thoughts from the mermaid crew?
I feel like I could always say more, but I don't know. This was a really cool discussion. I really liked. This is not. Can I say something not about Discovery?
Please.
I love Steed's outfit, his adventure outfit.
Yes, it's so cute.
so happy. First of all, he looks adorable wearing it. It's just well done. But then, and I think I sent this to Victoria because Victoria watched it. You know, we're living in different places, but she was sort of texting me while she was watching the episodes. And then she sort of like talked about the outfit. And I was like, my favorite part in thinking about the outfit is that Steed he paid a tailor and said, this is what I want you to make. And that person had to go and spend a lot of time creating and tailoring this outfit. Steed took that, packed it, and put it on the ship. Just so I have an adventure outfit because I'm going to be a pirate. And he has accessories and he has the little cover for his boots. And Jim said, you're going to have to wear a hat. And Steve's like, I have a hat, you know, so because of the humidity. Anyway, the costumes in this episode delight me to no end for various reasons, but that's my favorite outfit of the whole series because it's just so sweet and so charming and just says so much about who Steed is and what's important to him. And it's important that you have the right outfit. So that's all.
Thank you, Coco Chanel. I loved, Alexis pointed out that the shovel that Lucius carries has this little velvet purple bag that goes over it like it would over a bottle of liquor. It's really
looks
cute.
like Crown Royal.
It looks like Crown Royal.
They didn't even use it, did they? They didn't even use the shovel at all, right?
At the end.
Steve does.
I thought he was just digging with his
He was just digging with his hands.
I just remember them taking off the cover.
Yeah.
Okay. I was about to say that shovel was just a special shovel.
He brought us the good shovel. I think he calls it the good shovel. The one in the glass cabinet.
What?
Yeah.
Again, all of these things had to be purchased and put on the ship before we left. Oh, Steed.
Bring the good
It's
shovel.
a special thing for something, anything.
That's what makes Steed a Leo. Leo, you have to have all the finery and the niceties. Like you like luxury. Like that's part of being a Leo. Steed's a Leo. Just to throw it out there. And Ed's a Scorpio for anyone who's playing along at home.
Do you know
That's
their birthdays
great.
or you just like you figured it out?
Based on what they do. Yeah. I mean, again, you could argue many things, but we don't have to get into the astrology of it. But yeah, based on how they interact, I would say that Steed is a Leo and Ed's a Scorpio. And Izzy's a Sagittarius. We can talk about why later.
Yeah, we gotta get set up some interviews, ladies, because I want to ask these actors and designers some more questions. Speaking of questions, we're ready to go into our sacred text reading practice, which is all about questions. It's a Jewish practice called Havruta, where two Jewish scholars would have a discussion over text that they've read. And this discussion has a special format because it involves one scholar coming with a question about the text and proposing an answer. And then there's a discussion. So I have a question from the episode based in the text. It's when Lucius is telling Ed that he's pretty intense and he wears leather and he's very cool and he might not get it. And my question is, what makes it worth it for Ed to get over himself and connect with Steed? And my answer that I think is that Ed accepts Lucius's call to get over himself because he does want to connect with Steed, and he just didn't realize that by playing along, he would be able to care for Steed in a way that Steed would feel cared for.
I think about his character as from the very beginning when we meet Blackbeard, he's kind of over his routine. He's tired of his routine, just like Steed is tired of his routine. So I think there's a part of Blackbeard that is open to a new way of living, and Lucius pointing that out could be something that sparks that I'm not going to do the same thing I was doing before, or because it's all about like the prestige of Blackbeard, and he's like letting go of that pride to support Steed with his silly adventure that he knows is silly.
So he's worth getting over, like it's worth it for him to get over himself because he's just tired of what happened and he wants something new. So it's worth it to just try something different. Is that what you're saying?
Or at least there's that part of him that wants that something different. It feels a lot like pride. It feels a lot like the thing that he has to get over is this, like, we see his pride earlier where he's like, people can't see me. They can't see Blackbeard going on a treasure hunt. That's the part that he has to kind of overcome, is his pride.
I kind of agree with that point. I think it really is pretty much Blackbeard being thinking too much about himself and everything, and not realizing that this was something more of like Steed doing for him, which Lucius like ends up pointing out and everything. And like Ed just really was thinking too much of like what he used to do, and like this is not like what I used to do and everything, and not really thinking about like the whole reason for this, because I don't think like it always like I think Ed just did a lot of stuff that he wanted to do, not like for somebody else. So I don't think he like really knew that this is what like someone else is doing for him, kind of thing, because he's never been exposed to like having done something like that for someone. So yeah, I think I agree with that. Like it's more like a pride thing and a little bit too much of a selfish thought kind of thing. It's like, no, like this is for you, and you're kind of ruining it because you're thinking too much about like how it should be when it's not.
Victoria, it looks like you're pondering. Do you want to jump in?
I'm just thinking. I'm trying to. Could you restate the question? Because then I'm thinking about all these.
My question was, what makes it worth it for Ed to get over himself and connect with Steed? First of all, I think Lucius's read is beautiful. I just love that he's like, listen, this is who you are and how you're perceived. Also, that freakish little man loves you and did all of this for you, so you can play along. Now you can punch me in the face.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was thinking when I'm just trying to like think about what that means. I was just thinking about how it played out, and that Lucius is a part of that, right? Because I think it's interesting, like the question that you pose is that you could like ask yourself, like, are we talking about Ed on his own figures out something that's worth it? But he doesn't. Like, he needs to be told, and then he makes a choice. So I guess I'm still thinking about the question. And so that was one, as I'm trying to like unravel it, like that's one thought I have, is like what that process looks like to get to that point when he decides what's worth it.
It feels like there's a lot of those bids for connections. And this is, I don't think this moment would happen if they hadn't had previous moments of vulnerability and some connection there, that he clearly values that enough to keep going, right? I think that's interesting, because I hadn't noticed earlier, you were talking about this instinct to retreat. I hadn't noticed that pattern because I guess I'm just seeing it as like they have these little instances that they have gone through and had these moments that just keep building, so that it is worth it for him to stick it out and to get over himself.
Yeah, I actually think now there's like different pieces. There's I think what we've talked about too is interesting, like to tie it back to the theme a little bit, is we've talked about discovery kind of unraveling, right? That it's not a linear thing. You discover one thing and then you peel away another thing and discover. And so I wonder if this like deciding something's worth it is similar. Because the thing I'm thinking is that it's pieces, right? I think about what you guys said too about the bid for a connection, right? Where Steve shows the moth, and you can see Ed like struggling with like, this, and I think he even said, this is what? And then he adjusts, and so he's constantly making these decisions. He's constantly struggling with like how uncomfortable he is in nature and his vulnerability from the night before, whenever it was previously. And so he's feeling not sure, he feels the need to retreat and protect himself, but also, and so I guess what I think the answer to your question, if we want to do one answer, is actually in the next episode, because he really, really has to face that question, because none of this is inconsequential. All of this matters for relationships, right? Especially when you think about bids for connection, nothing is small, like they all matter. And so that was just another thought I had, is that the answer to this is actually in the next episode.
Yeah. Anna, do you have any?
I think so. Havrucha's hard for me because it just needs so much time to sort of take the question apart and then put it back together. So I don't think I have anything fully formed. I guess I would say what I'm thinking of right now, like the pieces I have right now, are this question of what makes it worth it, for what makes, like, the addition of worth, I guess, that word worth. Like, what do we mean? What do I mean by that? Like, how would I define that? How would I see that? How would I track that? And then how would I apply that to like what I see in Ed? And I think what I am thinking about is that is all, because I think of worth automatically, I think of like money and value, where I think of all these calculations about investment and putting money in and how much is too much. And then when do you sort of like cut your losses? And I don't know if that is how Ed is processing this moment, because I think that Ed is such an intuitive person. He just sort of reacts with his gut. And I don't know if it's a process of thinking through everything that Lucius said. Like, does he really understand, have the capacity to sort of like zoom out and see, like, this is what my life would be and this is how I would be, and because it just happens so quickly. What I see in that moment is Ed sort of has these things start churning up and he just reacts, like he just moves towards Steed. And so I guess what makes it worth it is maybe just moving towards Steed, because every time Ed retreats, he comes back again. Like, I think to Victoria's point about, the answers maybe in that next episode is that, what's worth it is he can't quit Steed, you just can't quit him. And maybe that's it. Maybe that's what makes it worth it for Ed, is he's like, no, even though I'm not like mentally in, like my gut is in, like I'm in, because he just can't quit him. And nor does he want to, really. That doesn't really answer your question, but those are the pieces that at some point I will assemble into a cohesive answer.
One of the things that I wanted to go with that is that, like, I feel like, I think I agree, like it's kind of a gut feeling, and with Ed, and I think it's like, so far from what we've seen in the past few episodes, it feels as though like a lot of the instances where Ed seems to retreat, he goes back to Steed, because it's like, it feels like it always seems like a good thing. Like, it's never like really a bad thing. It's always been like a more positive experience for Ed in general, which, relating back to kind of the discovery, self-discovery kind of idea, is that one of the things that I always think is that, like, when you meet new people in your life and stuff, you kind of you start learning about, like, I feel like that's one of the ways to start learning about yourself, like more self-discovery, when you make these connections with other people. And I think we're getting a lot of that with Ed and Steed, where it seems like Ed's kind of discovering more of a side of himself that he didn't know maybe he really had, and everything. Maybe he like hardened it, like after the whole trauma with his father and stuff, and is now relating back to that side again after meeting Steed. And so I think it's a lot of like, he just kind of got a reminder from Lucius of like, hey, like, it's, this guy's doing it for you. And a lot of the things that you're doing, a lot of the things that you guys do together, it's not, you always seem to really generally like enjoy it. And you seem like, and he's becoming more vulnerable, and you can tell like Steed's becoming more of like a safe haven for Ed to feel more like, I don't know, I think naturally himself, because he's opening up about all these like very vulnerable moments and stuff and everything. And yeah, and again with like Victoria, you kind of see like in the next episode more of like, I think kind of adds more to it, where it's just like this friendship between Ed and Steed is definitely very different from like what he's had in the past, and this might be like better for him with Steed. And so like I said, I think it's I think it's worth it, because I think instinctively, like, this might be better. Like, Ed might be feeling that this is a good thing for him.
I really like that we got to have this conversation because I think for me, this was just an interesting moment. And I never really thought about how Ed really has to choose to not be prideful and to not isolate himself and choose to be connected to another person because he has Izzy, an incredibly loyal, maybe friend, but definitely first shipmate, first mate. I don't know pirate terms, but Izzy's undyingly loyal to Ed. But Izzy and Ed do not choose each other. And I think there's something that happens in this episode where Ed chooses a relationship and chooses to cooperate and be with Steed more than just to retreat and like be cool and be alone. So I like that that's a very Havruta type answer to me.
Yeah, I think the question of is it worth it actually comes after you've had all these moments and all these things happen, and it could be years and years and years later. It doesn't happen. I think because like of what Anna was saying, like Ed thinking instinctively and with his gut, it pulls him along this trajectory, whether it's I need to retreat now, or I'm gonna be vulnerable, or I'm gonna make this respond to this bit of a connection. And so now as you say that, I think of like how it would relate to my own life and how I approach relationships. It's much, much, much later that I tell myself it's worth it. I couldn't point to a moment or even like specific moments where I'm like, it's worth it. It's worth it. That's going to come much later.
Well, I think that's for me, the appeal of this show is how much it makes me really reflect on my own relationships, and reflect on where I see regarding the dynamics. And I do like, I really like what Victoria said about like, it just takes time. Like again, with relationships, you sort of invest in them every single day you show up. And every single moment you sort of show up, and then you sort of discover the worth, you discover the treasure after time. Like, you know, if you think about like the petrified orange, like it doesn't get petrified until a long time has gone by, you know. And now all of a sudden it's this really rare, this really special thing, this really unique thing from this tree that is supposedly, you know, that is dead, that now still has like, that's just a lovely little phrase of like the tree had one more fruit to give or something like that Jim says at the very end. And so I think tying this question into that of, I think again, it's just one of those things I love so much about the show and all of the characters and all of the different relationships, but for me, particularly Ed and Steve, because I just feel I understand Steed a lot, and I see in myself how there are moments of Ed as well, you know. And so I think, I don't know, that's why this show just feels so generative, and that every time I watch it, I find something new and I see something new, because again, it just really centers the importance of relationship, and discovery isn't one moment in other shows or other TV shows, like, here's this one moment and now everything's different. It's really like, it feels more natural. They feel more like real people, because it's these little fits and starts and these discoveries happen. And then the other person will discover something else, and then they're going to react because now you've changed and you're different. Anyway, that's a long way to say yes to all those things, because this is a very well-written show.
We have come to the portion of our episode where we get to bless characters. Anna, we'll start with you.
I am going to bless Roach. Roach, we didn't get a chance to talk about. Roach is, I just can't get over that moment when Steve throws Roach under the carriage with that 40 orange cake that he insisted upon. And now there's no oranges, and now we're making it Roach's fault. And Roach's reaction when Steve says it barely tasted of orange, where he's like, come on, Steve. Like, I know you got stuff you're focused on, but bless Roach, who's really, I'm sure, so skilled at what he does and cares so much and takes care. And you can see in the next episode all of Steve's food demands that he has based on the life that he's used to. And just Roach, because then Roach goes, to the island, and you have this really cool exchange, with Black Pete's like, I'm gonna be in charge. And then you see there's this little moment where you see Black Pete just sort of ordering Roach around Roach is actually the one fixing the wall. And he's kind of falling over, and he's trying, like, he really wants these oranges, and he's really going to do the work to get it. And no one else, I don't know, is taking it seriously enough, aside from probably the Swede. So bless Roach. I'm glad he got his oranges in the end, because he deserves them. And I'm sure his cake was delicious and tasted well of orange. So that's my blessing.
I'm going to bless Lucius this episode because I very much have been enjoying Lucius being this kind of, he has been that in-between person, at least with everyone, from what I feel. And he's kind of feels like the glue and trying to get everybody together and all of that. Like, especially in this episode with him helping, I really liked him helping Ed and Steed without Steed really knowing, but really helping this adventure that just wasn't I don't think was gonna go well at all if Lucius wasn't there to try to keep it all together, because even that entire time Lucius was very much in between the two of them. And I just really enjoyed him, and I really enjoy that energy, and I really like that how much he just really just trying to help everybody out and all of that. And that is one of my favorite lines. I don't talk that way. I'm not being sarcastic. It's just the way I talk. And it's just he was so enjoyable in this episode. And I love that he's just so much I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to make a point to the scary man and everything. And he's like, okay, I'm done. I'm ready to get stabbed in the face. So I really like Lucius. Be a Lucius. He stick your ground, and then also be ready for the consequences.
I love it. Be a Lucius. Victoria, who do you bless?
So I'm going to bless a pairing. So I'm going to bless the pairing of Ed and Lucius, because in a story, they are the most unlikely two characters that we're going to, if you're thinking about a sitcom and you've got the A, B, and C storyline, and I'm like, wait, they're talking and listening to each other and giving insight. And so I was trying to think of some of the comparisons we made. And because the Muppets have come up a few times, I came up with it'd be like pairing Gonzo and Sam Eagle, or Beaker and Miss Piggy. And you're like, we're going to have a whole storyline with Gonzo, with Miss Piggy and Beaker? She's going to lose her mind. But Beaker's like, I have something to say. Anyway, I would like to bless this very unlikely pairing, because it gave some amazing insight to all of us. And I think piggybacks on what Evelyn just said about what Lucius brings to that. And look, even when you pair him with Miss Piggy, I'm not saying as Miss Piggy. I'm just saying.
Ed is totally Miss Piggy. Ed is 100% Miss Piggy. Hi, yeah. Ed is so Miss Piggy. It's amazing.
It totally is.
That's funny.
Or Sam Eagle, just so crazy. Anyway, that's my blessing.
No, I love a pairing.
Mm-hmm.
Alexis, who do you bless?
Oh gosh, that is such a fun and funny blessing that I feel on the wrong foot, because mine is very somber, because I want to bless Jim's family. We don't know a whole lot about the family, but gosh, what grief and what trauma. And my heart goes out to that whole island, but that family and the things that are happening in the world. I'm not sure if I'm just especially tender to it, but oh, a blessing to the grieving. Come on. Yeah.
This feels like an awkward thing to say afterwards, but my blessing is to the Swede. He's grieving. But he's so very childlike in his need. And I love that he asks for help when he needs it, and that he is having his fingernails fall off and his teeth come out, which don't go back in. And the most compassion that he's given is go take a run. You're on a a pirate ship. What a terrible place to run. Like, I'm going to run back. What I'm going to run for? I'm going to But like, that's kind of what he's given. Like, he's ostracized and, because maybe scurvy is communicable and our flag means death. And he really needs other people to help him. And I think we have that beautiful episode where, maybe singing, like maybe it doesn't have to be scary. Maybe it can be about self-expression, and he sings, and he's really generous in the way he shows up with his crew. So bless him, because I like that doesn't end. And we know he grows into a different kind of a adult with Spanish Jackie. So bless him.
All right. Next time we will discuss episode 8, and Evelyn has chosen the theme Alliance.
Until we meet next time to talk it through as a crew.
I would love to be stabbed by Jim.
Yeah, probably deserved it.
It wouldn't be the same with 6.
We didn't come all this way to not dig something up.
On your feet, we're having a day.